sex for favors, secrets, cover-ups, corruption. I've heard things that'll blow your mind, and now I think it's time you get the whole story. I'm Jesse Ventura, and this is Quinnspiracy Theory.
The video I was originally going to upload tonight is gone. I've scrapped it, it's deleted. I've decided to do something different because of this. What you're looking at is a copyright claim against a YouTube user by the name of Mundane Matt on a video called Hell Hath No Fury Like a Lover Scorned. That copyright claim was filed by Zoe Quinn, the person who is the subject of the video itself. Now, in the copyright claim, she had stated that he'd used a still image of her game Depression Quest, which she's a creator of, and that she had ownership over that, and that's why the video needed to be pulled down, because it was infringing on her intellectual property. But the truth is, it had nothing to do with that. The image Matt used in his video, and it was just one image. I want to show you his typical format. This is a typical video that Mundane Matt will put up. You have a still image in the background, you have a transparent barrier on the left-hand side with a title, and he talks over it. And that is exactly what Hell Hath No Fury was. It had a still image in the background, a transparent barrier, title, and he talked over it. Now, the image he used was a publicly available image. This game is out on Steam. You can see these images. They've been used in news articles, they've been posted on websites, they're publicly available through the company on Steam itself. So her copyright claim had nothing to do with him using her intellectual property. What it had to do with was suppressing information from getting out. And that's something that's been going on now for the last 3 days since this began. Sites like Reddit and NeoGAF and even 4chan on certain boards have suppressed this from being talked about because of the implications it has in the gaming industry. Now, what started all of this off was a WordPress blog called the Zoe Post. This was put up by a man named Aaron, who is Zoe Quinn's ex-boyfriend. In the entirety of the blog post, which is extraordinarily long, he goes through a laundry list of complaints as to why the relationship failed and why he's upset. Now, these all seem to be valid to me, things like lying and manipulation and infidelity. However, at face value, it's nothing more than that. Why would that be interesting? So is she taking videos down because she's embarrassed about it? No, she's taking them down because of the people she slept with, that she cheated on him with during their relationship, and who they are, and specifically what they can do for her as an entrepreneur. Gaming journalism has reached a low point over the last 5 years. It started with pieces that had nothing to do with gaming or game reviews, nothing to do with software or hardware, nothing to do with events or expos. It started to travel off into the areas of social justice and feminism and opinion pieces and op-eds that had nothing to do with gaming. It started to have authors who were writing pieces condemning the gaming audience as being sexist and misogynistic, as being racist and bigoted, as being overly violent rapists. This has been seen on Kotaku, on Rock Paper Shotgun, on Destructoid, on The Escapist, on any website you can name. This has been transpiring for the last 5 years. It seems more and more these outlier pieces have become the standard, and that the narrative put forward in them has become cohesive and refined, like a talking point targeted at us as the audience. And there's a reason for that. And Zoe Quinn and what's happened over the last 3 days helps to point that out. That is why this is important, and it needs to be talked about. This has nothing to do with her as a person in a relationship. I don't care that Zoe Quinn fucked 5 guys. I don't care that Zoe Quinn cheats on people she's in a relationship with. That's on her. That's her own personal accountability. Her ethical and moral failures as an individual are for her and her partner to deal with. However, when the people she's having an affair with, when the people she's cheating on her boyfriend with, happen to be able to help her career through their actions related to the industry that she's in, then it becomes a piece of public discourse, and it becomes important because it helps to highlight a massive flaw in the Fifth Estate. Now, if you're like me, you've grown up watching mainstream media, television media, die a death. And it didn't just die this death because of the invention of the internet. It died because of its lack of ethical standards. I'd be surprising no one by telling them that Fox News and MSNBC and CNN and every other mainstream media source you can name is corrupt. We've seen this happen, and we've seen the result of their reporting afterwards. Backroom relationships, money changing hands, manipulation, illicit acts have slanted old media to the point where it's unreliable and no one trusts it. So when the Fifth Estate emerged, when we had internet journalism, we felt like we had something we could believe in. We were going to report to each other. We were going to be the honest people. We weren't going to let other outside factors influence truth. But it has not happened that way. And what took a century to kill old media has taken mere years to undermine new media. So let's start at the beginning and see what the hell is going on here and why this keeps being pushed down and why nobody's talking about it. Now, Zoe Quinn's notoriety extends quite a ways back. As I stated earlier, she's an indie developer. She released a game on Steam called Depression Quest, and reading the description it states, it is a flash text-based adventure game about a person living with depression and how situations affect them. Who doesn't want to play a game about being fucking depressed? I rank that right up there with gems like I have the chicken pox and the hit sequel I have shingles now, oh god does it hurt. Yet this is a game she pushed through Greenlight. How did she get it through Greenlight? In fact, how did this game even get on Steam? Well, if you trace this back to its origins, when she was originally developing it, she started to get a lot of press because she was harassed. She was the victim of a sexist campaign by evil denizens of a website called WizardChan. Now, WizardChan, for those of you who are unfamiliar with this website, is a image board dedicated to the movie Hocus Pocus. They are Disney fucking fanatics over at WizardChan. But apparently, they have an issue. They have a major issue with Zoe Quinn and her game. And she went to Twitter and she went to social media talking about how she's being persecuted and harassed, how people are calling her house and showing up in real life, how it's unnerving her and how terrible this is. And what do you know? The gaming journalists, gaming press jumped to her rescue. Sites like GamerRanks and Kotaku and Rock Paper Shotgun all talked about how brave she was. Even other people with notoriety in the gaming scene right now were sending her messages of encouragement, like Anita Sarkeesian and Dina from the Project Mighty No. 9. Another person who, might I add, fucked her way into a position at a company. Now that sounds all fucking well and good, except it's completely untrue. And I can prove to you that it's untrue with the link in the description. Go check that out. It's an Immigrant album, and it is a chronological explanation of why Zoe Quinn is full of shit and why this website WizardChan didn't target her. Now this is important because it helps to establish her character, and we're going to be getting into that in a minute. But what you really need to glean from this is that she was supported by the gaming press and by other certain indie developers and other notorious people like Anita Sarkeesian against these hordes of horrible trolls that apparently were trying to keep her down. Because obviously a video game about depression just is too much for a troll. Now if you fast forward a certain amount of time, the game finally gets through Greenlight, and it gets up on Steam despite numerous people saying they didn't like the game, they didn't think it belonged on Steam, the community voicing their opinion against it, different websites dedicated to video games saying that it shouldn't be on Steam, it doesn't make sense, that it's a non-game. A similar argument that's been raised for other indie developed titles that were supported by the gaming press, like Gone Home and others. Yet she got it through, and the game got up on Steam. And that is where our WordPress blog, the Zoe Post, comes into play. Because now we get to see from the perspective of somebody who knows her personally, namely Erin, and their relationship. Now the interesting thing about the Zoe Post blog is that it chronicles and has captures of interactions on social media. And we get to see what kind of person Zoe Quinn is. And we get to see how she's a liar and a manipulator, and how the people at WizardChan who put together that album that's linked in the description weren't really bullshitting you when they said she's fucking making it up. Now at the heart of the Zoe Post, aside from all the things that Erin wrote down about her, aside from her white lies and her omissions of truth, besides the deceitful behavior and manipulation, is the infidelity. And he names specifically 3 people in his post. He omits 2 names. Of course, due to technological wizardry of other people, those 2 names have been found. And so this is a list of 5 guys. And again, I'm not putting their names out there because I think it's wrong she cheated in a relationship. I'm putting those names out there to show you, or to start to show you, how corrupt gaming journalism and game development have become. These are the 5 guys. Now, to start with, on the very far right-hand side is Joshua Boggs. Now, he was her boss. She had sex with him while she was in a relationship with Erin. The interesting thing is, Joshua Boggs is married. So not only was she having sex with her employer, she was having sex with a man who's married. This didn't cause her a crisis of conscience, even though she's made statements in the past on social media saying how wrong it is to have affairs, how terrible it is to cheat on somebody when you're married. But again, as a liar, she says one thing and does another. Some other names that are listed there are Robin Arnott and Kyle Pulver, both indie game devs. You have Brandon McCartan, multi-award winning indie game dev prodigy for Fez and Aquaria. That's interesting on its own for some things that happened just yesterday, but I'll get to that in a minute. But really, the biggest fucking issue that we're looking at right now is the name in the middle. Nathan Grayson. Who is Nathan Grayson? And why is it important we talk about his and Zoe's relationship? Nathan Grayson is a video game journalist. Nathan Grayson is somebody who wrote for Rock Paper Shotgun and currently writes for Kotaku. Nathan Grayson is somebody who has published positive pieces about Zoe's game, who has given her publicity, and who has marketed her product while having sex with her and not disclosing it. Now, there's a word for people when there's a professional conflict and they need to step back from what they do as a job because of conflicting things. It's called recusing oneself. Nathan Grayson not only did not recuse himself from writing the articles that fluffed up her product and promoted her, he went so far as to hide the fact that they had a relationship. Here you see an example of just 2 pieces he wrote this year, one on Rock Paper Shotgun and one on Kotaku, talking about her product and her specifically. This starts to show a pattern of behavior in game journalism. These people have no professional barrier which exists between their relationships. It's not just that game developers and game journalists have friendships, or that they communicate, or that they cooperate and do things together. They are having illicit sexual relationships which benefit one another. Nathan Grayson is benefited by being able to write an article that will get him clicks and thereby ad revenue. Zoe Quinn is able to get publicity and make money. It is a disgusting relationship, and it is the opposite of what journalism is meant to be. But it goes much deeper than that. It's not just that they have relationships where one hand washes the other. It's that they bolster up positive public publicity and also suppress negative publicity. What I'm going to show you now is a screen cap from a subreddit that was talking about Zoe Quinn. This was posted just a few days ago in the subreddit, I believe, Tumblr in Action. This is mind-blowing, and it starts to show you just how fucking sick and twisted and corrupt game journalism is. So here's the post in question, and this is by Silly Slater. I'm going to read this verbatim, and I really want you to take in what she's saying, and then I'll focus on the really disgusting part of this. So, Silly Slater posts, "She fucking doxed me. Ruined a production for women, refused to contact us, and is currently taking money for a game jam with no start date, no location, and no judges. Okay, here is my story. We ran a group that literally said, any woman come up with an idea for a video game, we'll give you concept art so you can pitch your game, and we'll put all the pitches online. The internet will vote on the best one, and we'll make that game and give the profits to charity. If you get a lot of interest online and want to make the game on your own, you can leave the contest at any time. Literally everyone that was in the top 5 didn't have programming experience, so they couldn't make their own game. She was like, why do you expect women to work for free to make games? We said, well, they get 8% of the money as royalties, and they just have to give an idea. Other people will make the game, and the profits go to charity. Doesn't matter, it's oppressive. She started a fucking Twitter storm, crashed our website, got my personal information doxxed, got us banned from Twitter. We email reporters what's up, and they're like, duh, if Zoe says it's oppressive, it must be true. Maybe you should give her money for Rebel Jam, which has no start date, location, or any other information, but totally isn't a scam. This happens at 3 other major publications. We literally said we'd pay her to consult on future projects, and we'd close down the contest if she would explain to us what exactly is offensive. No response. No response at all. Unless a reporter contacted her, and then she's the victim. All this information is fucking online. The pitches are online. We did everything we said, but no online journalist will publish the story. Please vote. Even if we don't raise enough money, if we show there's enough interest, we can get a winner a grant to make their game. I'm literally making no money on this contest. I just wanted to focus on something other than women being oppressed. I wanted to show that they made good games, and everyone said that's not what women in games want to talk about. So I don't even know where to start about what fucking disgusts me the most about this. We have heard time and time again over the last 2 to 3 years from every gaming journalist outlet that women are oppressed, that they aren't allowed in the industry, that they can't make games, that people are holding them back, and that they just need an opportunity, just one opportunity to get out there and show what they're made of. And here a person puts together something that gives them that opportunity. Here's somebody saying, if you have a good game idea and you want to pitch it to us, we'll fucking make it for you. Show people that women can make good games by making good games, and we'll help you do that. I don't see what's not noble about that. I don't see what the fucking problem with that is. But here comes Zoe Quinn, the professional victim, the social justice warrior, who will lie and manipulate like she did with Wizard Chan, like she did with Aaron, her boyfriend. She comes in, she shits on these people trying to do a good thing for no profit. She doxes them, destroys their ambitions, fucks their company up. But the worst part of this, and this goes back to her relationship with Nathan Grayson, a writer at Rock Paper Shotgun and fucking Kotaku, that because that relationship existed, these people couldn't get the story out. It's not just that Zoe Quinn is having sex to get good publicity. It is that Zoe Quinn is using sexual relationships with writers and reporters to suppress bad actions. I want you to try to imagine this sort of thing happening in old media. Imagine Watergate. What if Nixon had driven down to the Post and taken Woodward and Bernstein aside and said, "Hey, if you don't post that whole scandal thing, I'll give you both a blowjob. How about a Hummer in the fucking printing room? Just don't publish anything." And yet it goes deeper. Remember how I mentioned Brandon McCartan? And also Robin Arnott. Take a look at this. Now, yesterday, Phil Fish, a indie game dev who made Fez, went on a fucking tirade on Twitter defending Zoe Quinn and saying that people who were targeting her were bastards and cowards and that you shouldn't attack a strong, brave, independent woman. Basically parroting all those fucking ideas that we've been reading in news articles that get swirled around their little social media circles. And he's saying this to all these people who are raising questions about journalistic integrity. But yet he's making that argument. And why is that interesting? Well, she fucked Brandon McCartan, and apparently he has a connection to Fez. And better yet, somebody comes forward and says that they were sexually harassed at a wedding. Sexually harassed at a wedding by Zoe Quinn. And Phil Fish goes on a tirade against him, basically making him back down. Saying, don't you fucking dare bring that up publicly. If you do, we're going to come after you. And the guy backs down. And oh, look at that. Look who favorited what Phil had to say. Robin Arnott. So just so we're really clear on this, a woman who has repeatedly made social justice and feminist statements about strong, independent women, about equality, who says things like men, specifically gamers and trolls, are terrible and they're sexist and misogynistic, is somebody who uses sex to get favors, and on top of that, is willing to sexually harass people and then cover it up using industry friends with larger fan bases. Do I have that right, Zoe? You not only fuck for publicity, you fuck to suppress stories, and then you also fuck people to make anybody who criticizes you go away. Well, I'm not afraid of Phil Fish, the fucking one-hit wonder indie game dev. Yeah, by the way, Phil, that's why you're not making Fez 2. It has jack shit to do with pressure or you not liking your fans. It has to do with the reality that you can't make another game. You are a one fucking hit wonder. And if you try to make another game, you're gonna fail. So go on your Twitter tirade talking about Fez 2 never happening. Nobody fucking cares. Nobody cares, Phil. You are just an ugly, mutton chop, sideburn-having motherfucker with your little fake hipster glasses that runs your fucking mouth about what game development is. You are a dipshit. And you're also a dipshit that doesn't have any fucking standards, apparently, when it comes to people you know. Now, how do I know? Maybe Zoe Quinn fucked Phil Fish. They seem to have been at a wedding together. Phil Fish seems to know her quite well, and judging by Zoe's behavior and the favors she's curried, it's not really that far out of the ballpark for me to say that perhaps Phil Fish is defending her because of a relationship. Hell, what about Patrick Klepek? Remember those conventions they did together and the speeches, "Internet is serious business"? Who knows? Maybe Patrick slept with her. In fact, given that this is the reality of how these people behave and that they have no separation as professionals, let's say that Steven Totilo of Kotaku had sex with Anita Sarkeesian. Why not? You're letting somebody on staff at Kotaku who has a sexual relationship with somebody he writes about, and you don't have any problem with that. So judging from that, I guess you wouldn't have a problem doing it yourself. So maybe Steven is having sex with Anita. Maybe that's why Kotaku keeps writing those articles. It all makes sense now. We have now reached a point where it has become blatantly obvious in gaming journalism where relationships are influencing what gets published and what doesn't. It is no longer about reporting or journalistic integrity. It is about who is fucking who and who profits from it. And believe me when I say, Zoe Quinn profits from it. Her game may be on Steam for free as a free download, but her Patreon sure isn't free. Her Rebel Game Jam sure isn't free. Her begging people on Twitter from suspicious muggings to help pay rent isn't free. She is making money off the back of publicity gotten through sex. And game journalists have no problem with this. And of course, it's all the more hypocritical of them, given their stance on social justice, on feminism, on sexual equality, on gender equality, on sexual equality, on color equality, on all the buzzwords and hot topics they use to clickbait people into coming to their articles. Their high-handed morality and their ivory towers as they look down at us, the peasants, the filthy, disgusting, immoral peasants, and tell us what is right and wrong. And yet, right in their headquarters, right in their home, in their nest, they are doing all the things they condemn us for. They have ruined our hobby. They have shit up an industry. And it's not only us fans that suffer because of this. Look at Xseed. Somebody gets offended a day or so ago about a translation that they did, and all of a sudden they're getting flack left and right about that word because it's problematic and it offended a snowflake. So what is Xseed going to do? They're trying their best, they're trying to appease these people, but nothing is ever good enough. And it is perpetuated by these hypocritical cunts at gaming journalist sites that don't mean anything they print and they just do it for money. And Xseed is just one of the recent examples. I mean, here's another. Here's a journal entry that's up on DeviantArt called Save the Boob Plate. Now this is written by somebody who worked on a game. They worked on Divinity Original Sin. Look at that second paragraph. This journal entry is all about judgmental journalism, offended by design opinionators, and the fearsome white knights that the first two bring in their wake. And this person's talking about what it's like to try to create a game when you're bombarded by these assholes that are constantly shoving their fucking message down your throat. And what makes it all the more worse is that this person suffers not because these people actually believe in the shit they peddle, but because they make money off of it. They don't care. It doesn't matter to them. Their actions speak volumes about their character. So now at the close of this video, I really want you to think on this. We've seen what happened to mainstream media, to old media, as corruption destroyed it. Now we have online media, new media, facing the same thing. We watch as the Fifth Estate burns in front of our eyes because of hypocrites and the corrupt. It is in our hands to call them out on it, to bring them to task for it. If we sit idly by, and we don't, we have lost. Appeasement does not work. Burying your head in the sand does not work. It is not just us as customers that suffer as these people sling shit at us, telling us how terrible we are, and telling us what kind of content we should like. It is developers and publishers and artists and musicians that suffer as well because they misrelate a message from us to them. They preach about morality and social justice. They talk about ethics and an end to sexism and racism, and their personal behavior is abhorrent and completely contradictory to the things they print. They are in bed with each other, they communicate on Twitter with each other and other social media platforms constantly. There is no professional separation between a subject and an author. There is no decorum or acumen for any of these people. And you've just seen a taste of what's happening. Mundane Matt gets his video pulled down by a false accusation. Websites refuse to let this be talked about. And I guarantee you, we're going to see articles published by the likes of Kotaku and GamerRanks and others that are going to ignore these kind of accusations, and they're going to focus on how poor Zoe Quinn is just a victim, or she's being slut-shamed, or whatever buzzword they're going to pull out of their ass to dodge the bullet coming at their head. Don't fucking let them. Call them out. Call their asses out. Are you not sick of this shit? Have your games not been tampered with enough at this point? We as consumers, as gamers, have a choice. We either back the people that make the games we like, or we let these assholes dictate to us who's going to be popular in 10 years. Do you want an industry that's filled with nothing but Anita Sarkeesians, and Dinas, and Phil Fishes, and Zoe Quinns? Because I sure as hell don't, and I hope you don't either. So I encourage you to talk about this on different websites, on different social media. Talk about it non-fucking stop. Don't let them sweep it under the rug. Don't let them avoid the fucking issue. Call them to the fucking mat on it. We have a spotlight on this corruption and on their fucking hypocrisy. Make them answer for it for once. Make them be held accountable. We, the fucking fans, the gamers, over the decades have raised our hobby up into a billion-dollar worldwide industry. Not these assholes. They make money off our interest, not the fucking other way around. We hold the power here. They don't. And it is fucking time that gamers sent game journalists a very clear goddamn message. And that fucking message should be,
I'm gonna pull the whole thing down. I'm gonna bring the whole fucking diseased, corrupt temple down on your head. It's gotta be biblical.
Sex for favors, secrets, cover-ups, corruption. I've heard things that'll blow your mind, and now I think it's time you get the whole story. I'm Jesse Ventura, and this is Quinnspiracy Theory.
If these past 7 days have taught us anything, it's that the Streisand effect is a very real thing. The harder you try to suppress information, to censor it and prohibit conversation relating to it, the further it's going to spread. In fact, you would have been better served had you ignored it or allowed people to speak their mind in the first place. Yet, for the past few days, we've seen multitudes of examples of suppression and trying to prohibit people from talking about this. We've seen biased narratives put forward on websites with headlines such as "The Anti-Feminist Internet Targets Depression Quest Game Creator Zoe Quinn," or "The Sexist Crusade to Destroy Game Developer Zoe Quinn." We've seen websites which are wholly dedicated to discussing gaming, to discussing the industry and all the events and information that surrounds it, having threads where private correspondences are mocked by the administrator, where dissenters are banned, and where conversation is closed after the groupthink is allowed. On Reddit, one of the larger subreddits which exist, R Gaming, had a thread with over 25,000 comments in it, thousands upon thousands of which were deleted outright by a moderator who had claimed to the user base that Zoe Quinn wasn't relevant, that the information wasn't important, that there's no conspiracy going on, that they just want to maintain order and decorum. And yet, that very same person is seen on Twitter having conversations with Zoe Quinn while deletions are happening. In fact, they happen to know people in the game journalism industry. They're talking to people like Patrick Klepek about getting together and having a cup of coffee and how great it is to be a moderator on Reddit. And when people decided to try to reach out and get something done about this, they were told by other people in positions of authority to fuck off. We've also seen examples of people who work in the game journalism industry and who are related to game development come forward and relate how Zoe Quinn and corruption in game journalism is a taboo subject, that it isn't allowed to be talked about, and that if you bring it up, your career is in jeopardy. Some examples of this would include this particular Tumblr blog by a game journalist who says, "I brought up this whole thing with coworkers at the site I work at, and they just dismissed the issue. When I pressed the issue, the implication quickly turned from a dismissive hand wave to a very threatening, 'Talk about this anymore and you will be fired.'" Another similar example is found on the subreddit RPC Gaming, in which somebody posted a conversation they had had on Facebook, and the person responds to them stating, "Yep, also if you're ever interested in pursuing game development further, you really don't want to be a dick to Zoe, or any other game developer really. That's just not a good idea. If you decide to do that, do it on your own wall, seriously." And yet, despite these efforts to put forward a united front, to tell those that are interested in trying to look into this that there's nothing to see here, that it's a non-issue, there's no conspiracy, there's no corruption in game journalism or the development scene, the internet isn't buying any of it. In fact, it's created a bizarre, strange sort of alliance between websites which hate each other, whose user bases mock and deride each other on a daily basis, which have never agreed on anything except this one thing. When you see websites like Tumblr and Reddit, 4chan and GameFAQs, and even Funny Junk all saying with one voice, "We're not going to fuck off, we're not going to be mocked and told to go away, we are going to talk about this, there is something going on," despite their differences, despite the hatred those user bases have for one another, then that should tell you something about how bad game journalism and game development in the indie scene is. Now, ever since my first video went up 3 days ago, there's been a flood of new information in regards to Zoe Quinn, game journalists that she knows and has relationships with, different game developers, and the potential motivations behind those relationships. And one of the first things I wanted to touch on was a statement made by her ex-boyfriend Aaron about 2 days ago, in which he states, "Guys, you seriously don't want to go around making YouTube videos claiming the two names you uncensored are actually correct. First names are not sufficient to establish identity. At the very least, make it clear those two are speculation." Now, the two names he's referring to are Kyle Pulver and Brandon McCartan, two of the people that were listed as the 5 guys that Zoe Quinn had relationships with to help her career. Now, both Kyle and Brandon have both stated on Twitter that people are wrong, that they're not involved, that they have the wrong people, and that the information gathered is incorrect. And while Aaron's statement doesn't come out and outright say you have the wrong person, I'm going to lean on the side of what Kyle and Brandon are saying. I think that at this point, if it had been them, there wouldn't be any reason for Aaron not to just simply state, yes, it is them. And I do think the information that's out there that states that these are the two people, that the names have been uncovered and decensored and have been linked in various ways, are incorrect. And so what that means in relation to Zoe Quinn is there are still 5 guys, it's just that 3 of them are known, not 5. Now, outside of statements that Aaron's made in the last few days in regards to his relationship with Zoe Quinn and his thoughts on her relationships with different game journalists and people in the indie development scene, we finally got a response from Kotaku in regards to the allegations that Nathan Grayson, a writer at Kotaku, had a relationship with Zoe Quinn, a game developer. Now, Stephen Totilo first went to Twitter and then on to Kotaku itself to address this. Now, this is important for a few reasons, but I think the most important one is the fact that this is a third party who, through their conversation with Nathan Grayson himself, can establish that the ex-boyfriend's account of him and Zoe having a relationship is in fact true. Steven states that Nathan did admit that both he and Zoe did have a relationship. So it takes an element of pure speculation out of the ex-boyfriend's account. If it was completely made up, if it was completely fabricated, Nathan Grayson would have no reason to go on record and state that this did happen. Now, Steven in his release statement says on Kotaku, on March 31st, Nathan published his only Kotaku article he's written involving Zoe Quinn. He quoted blog posts written by Zoe and others. Shortly after that, in early April, Nathan and Zoe began a romantic relationship. I have no reason to believe any further action needs to be taken. Well, I'm so incredibly grateful, Steven, that you think no other action needs to be taken. That these timetables seem to be so uninteresting to you. That the fact that Nathan Grayson hadn't told you beforehand that he's romantically involved with somebody he's written about, and that may cause a conflict of interest later on. That you had to confront him after this information came out. And that you think there's nothing else to really be looked at, and that Nathan really doesn't need to be, persecuted by you or others, or us as the gaming public. Now, this entire thing started off with a sex scandal. That's what began this all. Zoe Quinn and the Five Guys. Zoe Quinn has alleged relationships with different people in the industry, and these people may or may not have helped her career out. And you and others have remained quite silent about that. Well, excuse me if that comes off as incredibly disingenuous. Excuse me if that comes off as seeming like you're covering your ass and you don't want to have to really look into things. Now, I want to start off by establishing the bias that Kotaku and Rock Paper Shotgun have when it comes to sex scandals. Now, many of you are probably familiar with somebody by the name of Max Temkin, the creator of Cards Against Humanity. Recently, a woman had posted on Facebook that Max Temkin raped her in college. Now, Max later went on to make a statement saying that he had not raped anyone, but that he understood she might have misinterpreted their relationship and is now seeing things that weren't there, or that maybe he acted in a way that made her uncomfortable, but he had not raped her. Now, Kotaku and Rock Paper Shotgun both ran articles about this. I'm going to show you some. Now, Patricia Hernandez had written one where she essentially said that Max Temkin shouldn't go and establish his innocence, that he should use rape allegations against him as a way to talk about rape victims. That makes sense. Somebody accuses you of rape, but you shouldn't deny it because that might hurt rape victims. Instead, you should stay silent on that and talk about how bad rape is. How insane is that? Even stranger still is John Walker's position on this. Now, in the original article that was released on July 15th on Rock Paper Shotgun, written by Robert Florence, these lines struck me as being interesting. Max Temkin, co-creator of the game, has been accused of rape. Temkin has addressed the accusation and asserted his innocence. The article then goes on to say, so it's weird not to talk about it, right? Why is no one talking about it? Follow on. Now, it's suspicious that they had no problem talking about this. And then John Walker, when the Zoe Quinn allegations start popping up, posts this. For the avoidance of doubt, anyone who posts on RPS anything about the private lives of anyone will be instantly banned. I am so horrified by the treatment of Zoe Quinn and the despicable hypocrisy of these foul bigots who pretend to care about ethics. Well, fuck you, John Walker. You want to talk about ethics? Let's talk about ethics. Zoe Quinn and Aaron had a relationship. Zoe Quinn, like Max Temkin, is a game developer. Max Temkin was accused of rape and denied the allegations. Both your website, Rock Paper Shotgun, and Kotaku decided to run articles about Max Temkin, but you both have remained silent about Zoe Quinn. I find that interesting because in the records that are provided by the ex-boyfriend, Zoe Quinn admits to raping him. This is a screenshot from the blog post, the Zoe post. Look at article number 4. I'm going to read this to you. I've highlighted the really important bit, but I'm going to read the entirety. Views on the ethics of infidelity, which she maintained is inherently wrong even if the person who was cheated on never finds out, because aside from willfully endangering their partner by the way of increased STD risk, if the unfaithful party then has sex with their partner, they are doing so under false pretenses, and therefore without their partner's consent. That is, sex with a partner who doesn't know you've cheated on them is sex without consent. Now follow that up with this. This is a conversation between Aaron and Zoe. Aaron, you lied so much, Zoe, and you made me feel so terrible about even entertaining the idea. You demanded that I don't trust logic and demanded that I blindly trust you, and you worried about me cheating on you, like I was the one at fault somehow. Zoe, No, I was worried because I didn't want to fucking lose you again. It wasn't about fault and it wasn't about you. I wanted to start over, and I guess I never thought I'd ever cheat on anyone. And then you made me feel like legitimately anyone could. Like if I could, anyone could. Aaron. And your spiel about consent? Zoe. I still agree with that, and I fucked up. I hate myself for it. Aaron. And so you had sex with me without my consent. Zoe. I'm going to barf. So John Walker and Stephen Totillo will greenlight articles talking about Max Temkin denying rape allegations that are made against him because they think it's so interesting and so important when a developer of a video game is accused of rape. Yet when they are presented with evidence that Zoe Quinn willfully admits that she had sex without consent, that she raped someone, they don't think that's worth talking about. They don't think it's an ethical double standard? You don't think there's a journalistic question of fucking integrity? I want to remind you that Stephen Totillo has a fucking master's in journalism. Stephen, of anybody involved in this, what in the fuck? This goes to prove that there is an agenda-driven purpose behind editorial pieces that are put up on these websites. They have no problem doing this to a man, but they will not do it to a woman. A man is accused of rape and the man denies the allegation, they run the story. A woman admits to rape and they refuse to run the story. And you're telling me there aren't ethical questions involved. Now this isn't the first time, Stephen, is it, that this has happened on Kotaku? I want to play a clip for you. A clip that is available on Ben Kuchera's SoundCloud account. This is a clip from David Jaffe, the creator of God of War and Twisted Metal. Take a listen to this.
I feel terrible about saying it, but nowhere in that sentence do I say the only way you're going to get sex is underhanded trickery. That is your reporter bringing her own fucking agenda to the table. And you fucking know it.
This is her analysis, and she's going a little further than what you said. Perhaps.
And you know what? That's okay if you're writing about sort of benign shit, but when you're basically accusing someone of something really fucking awful...
The last is that a girl or woman couldn't actually win a co-op match on her own. Again, not literally what you said. This is how she's interpreting what you said.
And there are...
She's not the only person to have come up with these things, David. And she's putting this in context. Crude vulgarity that puts men in positions of manipulating women for sexual gain is misogyny.
Dude, okay, first of all, it's not misogyny. Misogyny is distrust or hatred of women. That is misogyny. That's what I'm saying. You don't get to just fucking make up your definition and say, where? Show me that.
So manipulating women for sexual gain, you don't think might possibly be related to hatred of women? You don't think
what the fuck are you people? Are you a fucking therapist? Yes, any action that you do, you could travel it down a certain psychosis or psychological path to get to some conclusion. Absolutely. But to say that as a statement of fact and to bold it and to say this is misogyny, are you out of your fucking mind, dude? That's Bush League and you fucking know it. And it's her second fucking week or her second day and you don't want to fucking call her out because you feel like it's a fucking bad hire. That's the truth.
She's not a bad hire. She's an excellent hire.
Well,
and not every story is going to make people happy. And some stories...
Dude, you know what? Give me a break. If you said Twisted Metal is shit, it's not relevant, it doesn't play well, that won't make me happy, but it's your opinion. You have a right. To not only call someone something awful like a misogynist or to imply that they're a misogynist very clearly, but to get the definition of misogyny wrong, and then on top of it to basically get your facts wrong, where in there did I say the only way to get sex from a woman is to be underhanded and manipulate her? Where did I say that? Never.
She was talking about the tone of the interview and what you're saying in the act of promoting a game. Where do you want this to go, David?
I don't want to go anywhere. I want to go. I'm respecting you because you keep reading shit. Well, I'm happy to be done. Trust me, I'll be done with you. I'll be done with your site. I mean, it's bullshit, dude. It's bullshit. It's Bush League. It's bullshit, and you should be ashamed of yourself. You're a fucking real journalist. I've always respected journalists. That's bullshit. You know, fuck Gawker, man. Fuck you guys. We're done. We're done. Don't fucking write about what the fuck you want, but we're done.
Okay, David.
Now, the article that David Jaffe is referring to was one that appeared on Kotaku on February 7, 2012, and was written by Kate Cox. I want to read some of this to you. Most trouble doesn't actually come from villains, and it doesn't come from people who actively stand around shouting, "I hate women." It comes from the thoughtlessness. By framing his statement as, "let her win and she'll give you a blowjob," Jaffe said a few things he may or may not have meant to. The first is that only straight men could possibly develop an independent interest in playing his game. The second is that the best way for a man to get what he wants is to come up with some underhanded trickery to apply. Crude vulgarity that puts men in the position of manipulating women for sexual gain is misogyny. Why is it that it seems time and time again, when it is a male developer on your website, Stephen, you have no problem allowing people to post editorial pieces and read more into it than may be there. Yet, when a female developer openly admits through her own definition that she has committed the act of rape, you don't post anything about it. Because there's nothing more to this, is there? Nathan Grayson's a great guy, and Zoe Quinn's a great gal, and Kotaku doesn't need to talk about this. John Walker, you're going to sit and lecture me on fucking ethics after you ran the Temkin piece, but for some reason you're not going to talk about Zoe Quinn? So protect their identity when they're a woman, and throw them under a fucking bus when they're a man. Are you people for real? Stephen, did you get your master's in journalism from the fucking University of the Twilight Zone? Because this is crazy town you're living in. So I just want to go over the standards. What are your standards exactly, Stephen? Or John Walker, or any of the people at any of these video gaming websites? What the fuck do you adhere to? What are your ethics? Apparently to you people, having sex with writers is okay. That doesn't create a conflict of interest. As if somebody at fucking CNN or the Washington Post could cover politics, let's say, and have sex with a candidate. But oh, no, it's okay because after they wrote an article praising the product or the candidate, they started having the sex. So that's okay, even though it's a little weird, right? Because, that article came out on 3/31, but they didn't start having sex till 4/1. Because that day difference, that's a big deciding fucking factor. Like, people couldn't think, oh, maybe it's a little lie by degree. Maybe somebody wanted to cover their ass a little bit. I mean, shit. Just because Nathan Grayson and Zoe Quinn were in a bed together after GDC with a bunch of other people, there's nothing untoward about that. That doesn't say that they have a close friendship or sexual relationship. I'm sure Nathan Grayson decided he wasn't going to have a romantic relationship with Zoe Quinn until after he wrote that piece. That's fine in your mind. That doesn't matter. To all you people, you think friendships and sexual relationships, that's not a big deal. We're fucking game journalists. We don't have to have standards. Nobody fucking cares. Nobody looks at us like we have a real fucking career. Nice master's degree, right? Like, who gives a shit? We'll write whatever the fuck we want. We'll call ourselves a blog when we get people flinging shit at us, but when we want to get into a backroom conference or we want to interview somebody at Sony or get a demo kit or something sent over to us, then we're suddenly fucking journalists. Then we suddenly have integrity. Hell, at this rate, why not let our journalists financially support people too? Oh wait, you already do that, don't you, Stephen? I mean, there's nothing wrong with Kirk Hamilton paying Zoe Quinn money. And especially since this was going on since fucking July. Hell, why limit it to Kotaku? What the fuck? Let's get other journalists involved. How about everybody pay Zoe Quinn money? I don't know. Philip Collar, you want to do it? Over at Polygon? All right. Oh, hey, there's Ben Kuchera. Say it to my face, Ben. Hey, glad to see you're donating too. This is all okay. We're going to give money to developers we write stories on. We're going to fuck developers we write stories on. This isn't an ethical quandary to you? Are you people insane? Do you live on planet fucking nuts? Like, what is going through your head to justify this shit? And the cartwheels that you all do to jump, like, I don't understand it. I don't believe that somebody can be this intellectually fucking dishonest. It is apparent in your articles that there is an agenda-driven bias. It is apparent that you people have a relationship with certain developers, and that when they're in the in-click, when you're all communicating on your social media together and exchanging phone numbers and having romantic liaisons and financially supporting each other, that you will protect them at any cost. Even if that means disregarding people coming to you with a news tip saying that particular person that you're friends with, you're fucking, and you're financially supporting may be doing something illicit or underhanded. Right? I mean, that is the argument I seem to be getting from your fucking camp. And all these other websites that are saying this is a non-issue. NeoGAF, it's a non-issue? To you, this is all okay, NeoGAF. This is all okay. Financial, sexual, doesn't matter. Game journalists are a fucking joke, right? Who cares? Let it be corrupt. What do we care? It's just video games. Aren't you upset about Ferguson? Why aren't you paying attention to Ferguson? That seems to be the big dodge right now. Anything to not look behind the fucking curtain, huh? At this point, it's fairly certain that none of you really care about keeping your house in order. I mean, is there anybody out there that might care about that? Well, I mean, maybe this guy. Maybe Maddie Lessem would care. I mean, he was one of the focal pieces of that article that Nathan Grayson did write about on March 31st of 2014, the indie game reality TV show that went to hell. You know, the one that sourced Zoe Quinn and Robin Arnott? Two people who, by the way, had a relationship as well. But not like that matters. I mean, sure, Robin Arnott was on the chair of the Indie Arcade Selection Committee, from what I understand. And Zoe Quinn does proudly display that she is the winner of that on her Steam page, on her product page, but I'm sure nothing's going on there. It's not like these people have pre-existing relationships. I mean, what exactly did happen to Maddie? Oh, that's right. He got fired. His career got fucked over. You know, all those articles talking about him, all the buzz about how he fucking sunk that show and how he was accused of all these terrible things. So he got fired for that. I mean, we have all these articles. There was one on Indie Stock, how the most expensive game jam in history crashed and burned in a single day, from Jared Rosen. Again, March 31st, 2014. It's interesting, some of the things he says in that article, huh? Under the section Day Zero, where he talks about how Zoe Quinn and Robin Arnott described the incidents of Day Zero because he wasn't actually there. What is clear, however, is that the pair fought a fairly bitter battle over their contracts. And of course, later on he goes to say, and Zoe pulled me aside with Baby and Tom as she demanded Maddie's head on a stick. There's nothing untoward here. I mean, it's not like you could do a whois domain check and find out that Zoe set up rebelgamejam.com on the very date these articles ran, and that on this website for this game jam that has not happened and no information has been posted about, it states that Rebel Jam is currently being headed by Zoe Quinn, and that if you want to help out, please donate here. And where is here exactly? Well, it would be this particular PayPal account, the Quinnspiracy. And whose PayPal account is that? I mean, is that the game jam? I mean, it's headed by Zoe, but obviously this must be a group endeavor, so whose PayPal is that? Oh, that would be Zoe's PayPal, the same PayPal she links to from beesgo.biz, right there at the tip me portion. That's weird, isn't it? That somebody would have a game jam donating directly into their normal PayPal account where they take tips. How do you separate that money? How do you keep track of it? One could almost argue, looking at this, that Zoe is taking money for something that's never going to happen into her personal account and spending it, and not putting up any information to update anything on. So I wonder what Maddie would think of all this. I mean, from his perspective, he's looking at a person who wrote an article about him, Nathan Grayson, who's confirmed to have a relationship, at some point, a romantic or sexual relationship with the person he sourced in a story, Zoe Quinn. The other source in that very same story, Robin Arnott, also is alleged to have a sexual relationship with Zoe Quinn. On the very day these articles ran, talking about how badly he fucked up this game jam, Zoe Quinn establishes her own game jam with a PayPal that directly links into her own private account, where she takes money and doesn't post updates. That would look rather fucking suspicious, like perhaps there's collusion going on. Perhaps there are pre-existing relationships which are altering the truth of the event. Perhaps maybe some of the key players intentionally fucked up a $400,000 game jam for this sole outcome. Who knows? I mean, hell, he could think up a lot of things, like the phone number to his lawyer, and a good court to drag Gawker's ass into, since they're the parent company of Kotaku, who all these people are associated with in some weird, vague way. All these different journalists and developers, and they all seem to have these relationships, and don't mind putting out bad press about certain individuals, and apparently profiting from it. That would be my guess as to what Maddie would think in this particular situation. It's now been 7 days since the Zoe Post blog first went up online. In the time since then, numerous new allegations along with pieces of evidence have come forward showing different kinds of relationships that have existed between the gaming press and different developers. These relationships have run the gamut from close friendships to sexual and/or romantic relationships to even financial support. There have been allegations that have been mounting that there's favoritism shown and that there's bias in the coverage. And yet, throughout it all, the gaming press refuses to address any of it, instead insisting to call the people that are interested in finding out the truth misogynistic or sexist or nutcases and idiots. If you want to demean those people that are looking at you right now with a critical lens, go right on ahead. But you are not going to be able to keep ignoring the mounting evidence that there is something seriously corrupt in your particular industry. If you want to wear the moniker of journalist, you'd better start fucking acting like a journalist. It's well and high and mighty to say that you have ethics and standards, but if you don't put those into practice and actually walk the fucking talk, they mean zero. And with every single blog post that you write saying you won't negotiate with terrorists, as if labeling us like that is somehow going to make us go away, you just prove that you don't know what you're up against. So let me remind you.
What are you? I've Gotham's reckoning. It and the borrowed time you've all been living on.
Pure evil.
I'm necessary evil.
No.
Sex for favors, secrets, cover-ups, corruption. I've heard things that'll blow your mind, and now I think it's time you get the whole story. I'm Jesse Ventura, and this is Quinnspiracy Theory.
It has now been 2 weeks since the Zoe Post blog first went up online, and in the span of 14 days, a lot of things have happened. One of the most striking of which would be the pushback on the part of gamers. It is a pushback against a corrupt gaming press, and believe me when I say they are corrupt, that is exactly what they are. When this first started coming to light, they originally tried silence. They simply sought to ignore it, and hoped that it went away. But it didn't. When that failed, they moved on to censorship which we can show, which evidence exists of, and yet that did not work. It just spread it even further, thanks to the Streisand effect. When censorship failed, they moved on to what they're doing now, which is mockery and attacking. And it will fail just like the past 2 attempts did. What they are not taking into account is people have had enough. And a prime example of that is the fact that we're even still talking about this. That we are on day 14 with a fucking hashtag Gamergate. That we are on day 14 with people in the movie industry, the television industry, the fucking music industry commenting on this. We are on day 14 where websites have some of the largest threads in their fucking history dedicated to this very thing. It is not going away, it is not diminishing, and it is not dying. And that speaks volumes to what is happening, because the internet is a place where things happen in quick succession. You are lucky if you can keep the internet's attention for a day, let alone 2 entire weeks. And yet, still, the gaming media, the gaming press, these supposed so-called journalists, are trying to act as if there's nothing here, that there's no corruption, that nothing needs to be addressed, or that anything that has been addressed as a result of the sustained pressure is not a big deal. That it's really not as big as you think. There's no conspiracy, there's no collusion. You're all just deluding yourselves and thinking that things are taking place and they're not really happening. But we, the game journalists, we have your best interest in mind, so just shut the fuck up and we'll tell you what to think. Now, it's been hard to keep track of all this because so much shit has come to light. So many different pieces of evidence and links and connections between different individuals because, I'll say this right out front, I think perhaps the biggest fault, outside of the blatant fucking corruption, would be the arrogance of these people. The gaming journalists that exist are some of the most smug, arrogant fucking people you will ever meet. But that works to our benefit. They think they can't be held accountable. They think that their faults and failures don't need to be addressed, and they are arrogant and defiant in their behavior. And because of that, they have dragged their asses across social media to such an extent that massive amounts of connections and evidence just sits there. Now, because of the scope of things that have taken place, I want to scale it back. I want to ask a simple question. Before all of this happened, who would you have listed if I'd said, name me a reputable game journalist or a website that you trust? Well, I think most people would have answered Forbes, and I think most people would have said Eric Kane. He's somebody who people looked up to. He's somebody that we held as an example of somebody who we thought had our best interest in mind, even if we disagreed with him, because we had seen his ethical standards and practice. Now, Forbes, and the people I'm going to be talking about, have not in any way been connected to any of this. None of their names have been brought up. None of them have ever been shown to have been in collusion with anybody else. It's just a site with 2 guys talking about this. But I think it speaks to an issue of the disconnect between them and us, between the gaming media and the actual consumer. Now, the first article we're going to look at is by Paul Tassi. It's called The Truth About Video Game Journalism, and it was published on August 22nd, so roughly a week from when the blog post first went up. Now, in his article, he mentions that there's a scandal going on, but he's not going to mention anybody by name. He then further goes on to explain that this isn't really an issue, that games journalism is fairly mundane, that they're not going to jump on a dog pile to slander an innocent woman, and that he feels uncomfortable calling himself a gamer now because of the toxic mentality of these people, of gamers that are curious about this, that want this to be addressed, because the bias is on our part and not the gaming press's part. It's our fault, not theirs. And while this article tries to come off as neutral and objective, it's quite clear it's not. Now, Tassi, as I said, he doesn't address any of the concerns. Instead, he says that she's innocent, and that's how he addresses it. He doesn't look into any of the evidence or any of the allegations. He doesn't want to jump on that dog pile. Now, you could look at this and say, all right, well, maybe that's his opinion. But then look what he writes on Twitter directly after publishing this. This is from August 23rd, from Paul Tassi on his Twitter account. All this, but doesn't this raise questions talk, reminds me of people being mad at the media for failing to prove Obama is a Muslim. If I had to guess, I'd say there's some overlap in those crowds. Now, that's ironic coming from Paul Tassi because in his article he states, ideally, we'd like to do so without being insulted. He doesn't want to be insulted as a gaming journalist. He's just trying to do his job. Even though he's going to spin a narrative that anybody questioning this is toxic, and that the woman in question, who he won't name, is innocent and being dogpiled on by horrible individuals. Apparently those that think Obama is a Muslim. So it really throws the objective nature of his article out the fucking window. That's not really journalism. There's no investigation taking place. You're not addressing anything. You're just putting up a smokescreen. It's an article that doesn't talk about anything. But it's not Paul Tassi we're interested in, is it? It's Eric Kane. That's the guy we look to. That's the guy that's held up as the example, as the fucking example of what game journalism should be. He's the guy we trust. So let's take a look at his article. It was Sex, Lies, and Video Games, and it was published on August 26th, so it's 4 days after Tassi's was put up. Now, while Kane's article does go slightly farther than Tassi's did, again, it's another non-piece. There's no real investigation taking place. It says there was a scandal. It mentions some partial details, but that's about it. And instead, it veers off. It veers off to talk about something he says echoes Jim Sterling's earlier statements about how journalists have a tough job and maybe it's hard to keep relationships separated, but let's not go into any specific detail. He even outright states in his third paragraph, let's gloss over the details. Then going on to further state, I've done the research. I've followed the various threads on the various forums, listened to the YouTube videos, seen all those little immigrant sleuth pics. And while a deeper look at the nature of the media industry relationship is warranted, this affair only serves as a leaping off point, not as a story itself. That is a sentiment we've heard echoed repeatedly since this began. They will not talk about this. They refuse to talk about this. And again, this is a publication that's not connected to it. And yet, it presents an image of a gaming press that will not keep its house in order. It won't talk about the objective failures of other game journalists. They won't do that. You can't talk about that. That's not acceptable. It's ironic that his article's talking about the closeness of relationships when it demonstrates the thing he's talking about by refusing to address the allegations made in relation to the scandal. And that is what it is. We're talking about a scandal related to relationships between indie developers, Zoe Quinn, and people in the gaming press. It was the catalyst for what has set everything else off. You could no more remove Zoe Quinn from corruption in game journalism than you could remove Richard Nixon and Watergate from corruption in politics. It is the focal point, it is the starting point, it is the catalyst. By refusing to address it, you're hand-waving us off. Now, one of the things I find concerning about this is that very statement, I've done the research. What does that mean? What do you mean you've done the research? You're a journalist. If you're a journalist, this is my understanding of what a journalist does. They investigate. They do interviews. They make phone calls. They look into possible connections, financially or otherwise. They actually get out and do the legwork. Watching YouTube videos and reading forum threads is not journalism. That's what bloggers do. That's what I do. That's what everybody on the fucking internet does. Journalists take it a step further by investigating and looking into the allegations, possible statements or connections. They do the legwork. So I find it disconcerting that that's your research and that then you go off and to talk about these vague things without addressing the specifics. Again, just like Tassi did. Now, later on in the article, you state, under this whole social justice warrior thing is a mess, just a complete mess. A fairly substantial set of gamers is absolutely obsessed with the so-called SJW, the White Knights of Games Media. And you talk about how you don't really understand that. You don't understand what an SJW is, and you're questioning, are you one? Because you believe in ideas of equality. Now, I find this supremely fucking funny because of something Eric Kane posted on his Twitter. This is from August 28th. I'm saying Divinity Original Sin is best game of the summer. What's yours? Putting aside the differences we may have in what a journalist does in regards to actual research before they publish an article, you stated, I've looked at the pics, I've followed the links, I've watched the videos. And you don't understand the whole SJW thing. Then you go on Twitter. And you say your favorite fucking game of the summer is Divinity Original Sin. Here's a fun fact. If you go back and look at that first video I put up, you might have noticed this blog post talking about hypersensitive journalists, white knights, and social justice. In fact, this particular person talks about how it interferes with their ability to do their fucking job as a creator. Do you know what game they worked on? Divinity Original Sin. Your favorite game of the summer. You don't understand social justice warriors. You don't understand how this entire thing that's been going on for 2 weeks is important, and you want to hand wave it off, but you've done the research, you've looked at the videos, and yet the videos, mine and others, cite this as a fucking source, and then you go onto Twitter and talk about this very game when somebody who helped create it is telling you these people are fucking with their career. But that's not newsworthy. Now, if you had done the legwork, if you had contacted them and maybe set up an interview, you'd have a better fucking idea for what people are talking about when they say agenda pushing, when they talk about social justice warriors, and when they talk about the impact that has on not only the consumer, but the developer of games. It is just frustratingly disappointing that the people who are perceived to be the better of game journalism fall into the same fucking pitfalls of refusing to look into things when people bring them up and circling the fucking wagons because you don't want to fling shit at your other fellow professionals, do you? That's what it feels like. So when you have all these different gaming sites putting media blackouts in place, refusing to talk about shit, and covering each other's backs, why do you think there's a notion of conspiracy? Well, how do you think that makes you look, Eric? How do you think that makes your profession look? Go check out the fucking, hashtag Gamergate. Maybe go do some more research, read some fucking tweets or something. Hell, at this point, I may as well become a contributor at Forbes. Why not fill out an application? Because obviously, the bar has been set really, really low. Why not? Why don't I get a job as a journalist there? And I'll read some fucking tweets and then whip up an article about it. Because that's apparently what research is nowadays. But you might be saying, wait a minute, Jim. You're a giant asshole. There's no way you could be a journalist. Well, I beg to differ. Let's take a look at some of these journalists and what they've been writing recently. Oh, here's one. Somebody asked, what does gamer even mean to you? And the response from somebody who's written articles for Polygon and other sites, shit person who cares way too much about video games. That's great. Good idea to insult the demographic. When I think Polygon from now on, I'm going to think people who think I'm an asshole and don't like people who play video games. Oh, here's another classy game journalist. My Twitter is full of wound-up nerds proving my point all day. I love that as somebody who plays video games, to have the people who purport and claim to be fans of gaming and who want to write about gaming and work in the industry insult me. That makes me feel all warm and fuzzy inside. Nerds, geeks, shit people. That's a really smart decision, and it doesn't make you all look like a bunch of bullying assholes. Now you may be saying, but again, Jim, you're a giant dick. That's true, but I'm not going around claiming I'm a fucking journalist, am I? You don't see my name slapped up on Kotaku. I didn't go get a master's degree in journalism, did I? But these people want to play pretend. They want to write on video game websites and pretend to be game journalists, and then go and behave in abhorrent ways. Now, maybe they're just a little bit salty because, somebody, don't want to name drop them because they've been really pissy at them lately, tore them a new asshole so fucking large that you could drive a semi-truck through it. And they are very angry about that. Because it's not somebody they can just push around. It's somebody bigger than they are. They don't like that. They don't like the idea that somebody in a position of power wants to take a shit on them like, they're taking a shit on us. But no, I really do think, I think I'm going to become a game journalist. I'll even come up with my own agenda because agendas are okay now. Maybe you all haven't heard of this yet, but having an agenda and being a journalist are not mutually exclusive things anymore. It's totally okay. Take this article, for example. Announcement readers who feel threatened by equality no longer welcome. Now, maybe you've never heard of this website, but it's apparently big in Australia. As they claim, we've also built one of Australia's most popular gaming news and review sites. And that funny little line under that, most experienced journalists. Well, let's see what kind of statements they make. As long as I am in charge of this ship, I will happily admit to pushing an agenda. Oh, and comments are closed on this article. That's another common theme among all these very brave journalists who like to go on Twitter and mock gamers. They'll immediately block them, and then they'll publish articles mocking them and close the comments because they are such brave professionals who are so open to honest feedback that they run away like cowards. Which makes you wonder, is there any redeemable quality to these people, to their profession, to these websites? Over the past 2 weeks, we've uncovered a treasure trove of things they didn't want to talk about. And throughout the course of it all, they kept telling us there's nothing to discuss, there's nothing to address. Take Polygon, for instance. Here's a statement they released this past week about Patreon support. Patreon, again, is a service that's like a monthly stipend. You're not creating a product, you're just getting paid to exist. That's what Patreon is. Think of it like the Kickstarter for people, except they never start anything. They just sort of lazily lay about because you're fucking paying the rent. Why would they get off their ass? So here's Polygon saying that they see no issue with their reporters financially supporting people. So think the likes of Kohler or Kuchera, that's okay. We can't see any foreseeable bias that might emerge from you investing in people in an industry you report on. This is like black magic to them. They don't get it. It's hoodoo. It's all mystical and shit. But then again, this is Polygon we're talking about. It's not like they have ethics in the first place. I mean, after all, these are the people that allowed somebody to review a game who had a relationship with the developer. That's a real class act, Polygon. You're really lighting the fucking way to the future of journalism with your ethics and behavior these past 2 weeks. Now, Polygon wasn't the only one to release a statement. Kotaku did as well. Editor-in-Chief Stephen Totilo released a statement about Patreon as well. His was different. He said they did find that there were conflicts of interest with people who report on an industry donating to people in that industry. So that will no longer happen to Kotaku. Now you might say, isn't that great? Look, here's Stephen Totilo taking a stand. And in fact, didn't he also address that Nathan Grayson thing? I mean, it seems like Stephen is actually stepping up to the fucking plate. Yes, it seems like that. I'll grant you that. It seems like that. If you go back a little bit, you'll remember his statement. This is a part of it that he put up on Twitter before he had a chance to actually write something for Kotaku itself, talking about Grayson. My standard has long been this. Reporters who are in any way close to the people they might report on should recuse themselves from reporting about those with whom they're close. If they must report about them, disclosure is mandatory. Readers deserve that. Well, that sounds really good. I mean, that's a position we as gamers should be able to agree with. If you know somebody, you have a relationship with somebody, whatever it is, whether it's a friendship, a very close friendship, or a sexual or romantic relationship, or financial ties, you should recuse yourself from writing about them because it creates a conflict of interest. And I mean, here he is making all these public statements, so obviously he genuinely cares about this. Except for the fact that Kotaku has tried to very quietly smooth over some rough edges without making too public of a statement. Now, what would that rough edge be? Well, none other than Patricia Hernandez. Buckle in for this one, because it's really going to be great. Hopefully Eric Kane's still watching. I really think you should pay attention to this next little bit. It might be educational for him. Now, Patricia Hernandez had a couple of interesting Twitter conversations that got people looking through some things. Here's one she had with Christina Love. Patricia writes, "The neck region is kind of one of the best regions, period." Christina responds, "Gosh, I had no idea you felt that way." To which Patricia responds once more, "How are you supposed to play that off when you've dated me? Ah ha 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 ha." And just who is Christina? Why, she would be a game developer. A game developer Patricia Hernandez wrote about. She did more than just write about her. This isn't a little positive press. She recommended you buy the games and put links into the article directing you to the fucking store page. Oh, but it doesn't end there. No, one conflict of interest, that would just be amateur shit. Let's bump it up a little bit. Let's bring in some friends too. How about Anna Anthropy? You know, another person Patricia personally knows, has a relationship of sorts with, maybe lived with, as you can see in this conversation that took place again on Twitter. And what do you know, Patricia wrote articles about her as well, giving her positive press and talking about her games and how interesting and insightful Anna Anthropy is. I also like those little updates on the articles, that address this. Oh, by the way, I know this article's fucking a year and a half old, but kind of had a relationship. Hopefully if anybody stumbles on this in an archive somewhere, they'll be alright with that. But they sure as shit didn't know at the time, did they, Patricia? So it comes off as slightly fucking disingenuous, Stephen, when you'll make public statements when you're pressured to and address ethical problems when you're pressured to. But when you think you can kind of slip by it, you do something like this. You put a little addendum on there and you don't address it in a upfront fucking public way. Which really begs the fucking question, what is it exactly that's going on here? Is it that Stephen Totilo doesn't know what his reporters are doing? Is he incompetent and oblivious to their ethical violations that are happening seemingly all over the fucking place? Whether it's financially, sexually, relationship-wise, press-wise? Or is he totally aware that these things are going on, but doesn't see a problem with them unless people pressure him about that? Because he's only responded to all of this shit ever since that blog post went up. So when I see other reporters saying that this is a non-fucking issue and a non-story and Gamergate isn't a thing and we don't need to talk about Zoe and all that related shit, I don't believe it. Hell, just at Kotaku alone we have multiple examples of ethical breaches. And time again we're met with the most bizarre of responses, which makes me, like I said, wonder, what exactly is going on? Are you unaware that your reporters are out of fucking control? That they're having sex with people in relationships and reporting positive press in their favor? They're linking to their store pages and promoting their products? Were you unaware they're financially donating to people in an industry they cover? Are you covering it up? Are you only responding because there's criticism against you? Do you genuinely believe in ethical standards for a reporter, for journalism? What exactly is going on at fucking Kotaku? What is going on at Gawker Media? Now, hopefully Eric Kane did listen to this portion because it leads me to this point. By being sloppy about how you investigate things, this is what comes about. And believe me, Steven has been led down this road. Here's a statement from him 2 years ago in the comments of a Week in Kotaku article. This is regarding Robert Florence and corruption in gaming. Look at what he wrote in response to that. I don't think it's an important story, but that would take actual reporting to find out, and I just don't care enough about the latest supposed media scandal to ask my reporters to look into it. How pervasive is this attitude in your industry? No wonder none of you want to look at Zoe Quinn. It's not just that you have connections to her. It's not just that you're corrupt. You're fucking lazy. You don't want to be bothered to do the work. That requires effort, and who wants to do effort? You're just glorified bloggers. And apparently, people in the industry see right through you. They know exactly what you're up to. They know exactly how you operate. And they're just not going to be bothered with your bullshit. But now it's the customer, now it's the reader, now it's the consumer that's come around to that. Now, when the Zoe Quinn story first broke out, when this entire shitstorm first erupted, we were constantly told it was of no interest. They didn't care that she had been in relationships with people in gaming journalism, and this has been confirmed by Stephen Totilo himself after interviewing Nathan Grayson. This is his own statement, that yes, we did have a relationship, but the timeline doesn't line up. That's something that Eric Kane said in his article, and other people have speculated on and stated, and yet there's evidence that's floating out there that shows that's actually not correct, that they've had conversations about taking trips together, that the Las Vegas trip itself skews the timeline, and that there's more going on to it, but you don't want to investigate that, because that's reporting, and that takes work. Just like I'm sure you guys didn't care about the fine young capitalists getting their shit kicked in by Zoe Quinn, having evidence of this taking place. You don't care about that. Who cares? It's just somebody trying to support women in game development. You don't care about women in game development. You care about putting on a false face to make a profit. You clickbaiting cowards. I mean, my God, right now, at this very moment, there's a plethora of connections and information relating to this entire thing. Here's a tweet to Zoe Quinn back in February. We exploded their site, oh my God, us. To which Zoe Quinn responds, oops, we DDoSed something by accident. Now, if you look at the entire conversation, it's them talking about harassing the fine young capitalists, it's them talking about going after the fine young capitalists, and throwing out criticisms that are frankly untrue and have been proven to be untrue. Now, who exactly is that that's making that tweet to Zoe? That's kind of interesting. I wonder, do they have any connection to any of this? Why, that account, that Twitter account, is owned by Maya Kramer. Well, who is Maya Kramer? Well, Maya Kramer would be in PR. More specifically, Maya Kramer happens to have connections. She works for Silver String Media. And guess who happens to be an advisor on Silver String Media? Anita Sarkeesian. Well, what a fucking coincidence. But hey, that's not the only coincidence. You remember that Indie Arcade Award that Zoe got on Depression Quest, and the people that are responsible for selecting the games that get chosen for awards? The people involved with that organization? It wasn't just Robin Arnott. It was also Maya Kramer. Correct. She's involved in that too. You know, speaking of Anita Sarkeesian, what has she been up to? Well, that's an interesting tweet. Video games, misogyny, and terrorism, a guide to assholes at badassdigest.com. Well, let's go take a look at that article. Well, that looks like a wonderful article about good, positive gamer culture. I'm sure it's not spinning a narrative at all. But Badass Digest, why does that sound so familiar? Wait a minute, do I know who's the editor? No, I'm sorry, the badass-in-chief at Badass Digest? Oh, that would be Devin Ferrasi. You know, the guy who doxes women on his Twitter account. Don't worry about it though, Anita. It's not like you're a feminist or anything. And besides, he has excuses. It's just this stupid fucking woman. He doesn't care. He'll put her information out there, doxing women on Twitter, giving them harassment. He's got justifications. Oh, who cares? It's a temporary email account. What's going to happen? It's not like they'd get threatened or harassed. But Devin Faraci, why does that... It still sounds familiar. What else do I know him from? Oh, he was the guy that was making jokes saying that he respects ISIS more than the people who are against Zoe Quinn. Now, wasn't ISIS the terrorist organization that kills real journalists? I'm stunned. Why would Anita Sarkeesian, a feminist, be linking to a website run by a man who doxes women and supports terrorism? That's fucking crazy. That's almost as bad as being an advisor at a PR firm that has relations to a person that destroys game jams dedicated to women. Now, Mr. Faraci here likes to compare people that are interested in Gamergate to ISIS, as in saying that we have a jihad against them, that this is some holy crusade. Well, he would be wrong. It's not a jihad, it's not a crusade, it's not even a revolution. It's a reformation. We are walking up to your front fucking door, and we are nailing our edict on it. Because we have seen what you've been doing to the thing we consider holy. You've been shitting it up with your corruption and your close relationships and your financial ties and spinning narratives that basically desecrates the thing we love. And when I say something like spinning narratives, that's exactly what I mean. See, ever since this Gamergate thing broke and people started calling out all these websites on the shady, underhanded shit they've been engaged in, that's been verified by people at these websites, whether they've excused it or admitted to it, we suddenly got this. A barrage that took place between the 28th and the 29th of article after article after article, one after the other, non-fucking stop, all saying the same thing. The gamer identity is dead. Gamers are horrible people. Gamers are terrible. They're misogynistic. They're sexist. We need to get rid of them. Well, excuse me for being a bit fucking incredulous here, but when I see 10 fucking articles all drop on the same day saying the exact same fucking thing, it almost feels like, I don't know, a PR company might be involved. Like these independent journalistic websites aren't really independent at all. Like maybe they're colluding with one another to put forward a narrative, a message, a talking point, or an agenda that they want to shove down the throat of the consumer. It almost seems like a hissy fit, like tantruming children that are upset that they've been dragged into the fucking daylight where they get exposed. And hell, this video has gotten so long, I've talked about so much of this shit at this point, because there's so many fucking examples of it, that I can't even get back to the Max Temkin thing. Yeah, that's right, apparently Zoe Quinn's ex-boyfriend posted more information in relation to Max Temkin's rape apology that he posted online. Apparently, guess who wrote that for him? Zoe Quinn. And why did she write it for him? Because he was going to financially support her game jam, and she didn't want bad PR, so she wanted to craft a message she thought would appeal to people. Are you fucking kidding me with this shit? Does it ever end? Is there a bottom? Have we reached it yet? I can't tell anymore. I want to drop a fucking nickel and listen to how long it takes before it starts bouncing off something. For the past 2 weeks now, we've been repeatedly told that this is a non-story and that nobody's interested, and yet all the information we have says otherwise. Site after site has repeatedly talked about it. Some of the biggest threads that have ever appeared on forums are about this very thing. Websites that are repositories for information have been accessed hundreds of thousands of times, Google searches 500,000 fucking times. It gets bigger and bigger by the day. If you think attacking us and trying to spin this on us is going to work, you are sadly mistaken. And I think perhaps the craziest thing about this all is that somebody needs to get a hold of Jeff Keighley and tell him to say thank you to Kotaku and Polygon and Rock Paper Shotgun and all of the others, because they've made him look good. Guess whose name hasn't been connected to any of this shit? Jeff Keighley. Guess what website hasn't been connected to any of this shit? IGN. He may be the fucking Dorito Pope, but at least he's clean in my eyes. Because after all, popes are celibate. And that's how I know he, sure as shit, ain't one of the 5 guys.
Sex for favors, secrets, cover-ups, corruption. I've heard things that'll blow your mind. Who cut the power off? Wait, what do you mean we've been cancelled? I'll have you know I was the governor of Minnesota. We're being replaced by who?
Oh, look at me. I'm Jesse Ventura. My show got canceled. We all know whose government you're working for, Jesse. It's time the real truth came out. By the power of water filters, I will destroy corruption. No more sex for secrets. No more cover-ups. It's time for Gamergate.
Welcome to Bizarro Land. It's the sort of place where electronics arts employees make reasonable statements, where Bobby Kotick is once again proven to have keen business intuition when it comes to certain individuals and their ability to manage projects and handle money. It's the sort of Twilight Zone-esque reality where site owners who've had positions in the past have seemingly swapped them, a la some digital version of Freaky Friday. Why, even Hot Pockets has responded, saying that the janitorial staff from 4chan is doing an excellent job. In fact, they deserve a reward, and what better reward than the hot, creamy goodness of a nuked Hot Pocket burning and scalding your throat as it explodes in your stomach. It has been a wild ride. It's been a month now since the last video I put up talking about Gamergate and the issues that were popping up, and by God, a lot of shit has happened since then, and I want to try to condense it down and give you a sort of chronological retelling of some of the key events that have played out over the last 4 weeks. To do that, I'm going to have to breeze through some of these, but I'll provide plenty of links in the description, so if you want to go and check this out yourself, the links will be listed to different articles and screen caps, so you can go check it out and see what you think. So with that out of the way, let's jump back to September 1st and see what's happened over the last month. Well, the first week of September was just chock full of interesting events. In fact, news came from PAX about Zoe Quinn's panel. Literally, tens of people showed up for it. As you can see from this non-packed picture of all those not existing people sitting in those empty chairs. In fact, I heard one of the staff members at this event had told people to be careful with their pocket change in case they accidentally drop something, and the reverberations of it created an echo so loud it was like a sound cone that would deafen people walking by the building. Luckily for Quinn, of course, DashCon members happened to be in attendance, and they had the solution that she needed. And it didn't even cost her $17,000. What a lucky day for Zoe Quinn. Now, right on the heels of that, we had 2 articles drop. One pro-Gamergate, one anti-Gamergate. And we're going to look at the anti one first. That was from Jen Frank for The Guardian. Now, Jen ran into a little bit of trouble. You know, apparently when you write an article and you have financial ties to the people you're talking about, that's kind of an issue in real journalism, and Jen apparently walked away from being a journalist for a little while in relation to this, because there was money coming from Quinn to her, and from her going to Maya Kramer, who had a relationship with Zoe Quinn as well. It did not look too good for Jen Frank, and people were a little pissed off, to put it lightly. Image macros were circulating, people were talking to The Guardian. Now, Frank had released a statement essentially saying that she had wanted to put a disclaimer in there, but The Guardian told her, no, don't do that. A little incredulous about that, but doesn't really matter because we had a new challenger approach. Milo Papadopoulos, famous television actor from Webster, and also body double for Phoenix Wright. Now, he began to tweet out at the very beginning of September that he was going to start to cover Gamergate. He was going to look into some things. And his first article really caught people's attention because he wasn't tepid or timid in how he handled the subject. In fact, he wasn't afraid of these corrupt journalists or their little buddies in the indie game development scene. His article, Feminist Bullies Tearing the Video Game Industry Apart, was well received. It got a lot of buzz online because it was the first real article to take the other position, to actually look into it. Now, Milo doesn't have any investment in the gaming industry. He's not a gamer. In fact, he had to learn how to play video games. He did a couple of live streams about them, just to get an idea of what the experience was like and what the gaming demographic was like. In fact, it would seem the very first week of September had a lot to do with news articles being released in news websites. Take the gaming website TechRaptor, for instance. Not only did their site host pull their support from them, sending them to talk about it publicly, saying, hey, you know, we've got an issue to deal with. We're going to have to look for a new server. You can see this in the screen cap. This is the conversation that was taking place about this. But it would seem that after that got resolved, they were shadow banned from Reddit, and on top of it, they had their website attacked in some manner that took them a few days to even be able to address it and fix the issue. Now, as a side note, I'm going to put a link to their website in the description because they were one of the very first websites to really even try to talk about this. They're a smaller website, and they tried to go to bat for gamers. They tried to talk about the issue because everybody else was being quiet about it. Nobody wanted to cover the issue. And as a response, they got harassed, they had their site taken down, they got banned from websites where they could promote or talk about their work. And that's unfair. It's unfair to the little guy trying to make a name for themselves in the industry. So if you're interested in gaming news, check it out. Give them a look. I'll also have Games Nosh down there as well, because they were another site that really tried to at least talk about it. Both those sites really stick out in my mind from the very beginning of all these things that have happened until this point today. Of course, not wanting to look like less of a prick than their gaming journalist peers, GamerRanks decided to fire a few shots off at the fine young capitalists, saying that they don't have an excuse to be safe from scrutiny. And their hit piece, GamerRanks went after them and picked apart at what the fine young capitalists were about, and they were very brave too by closing the comment section down so they didn't have to hear any feedback. Now, that doesn't surprise me, considering this is a website associated with Ian Miles Chong, former white supremacist. In fact, he might be the only Asian white supremacist I've ever heard of. That is one hell of an accomplishment, Ian. You can see from the screen cap that floated around shortly after this that Ian has one hell of a history and some very unique viewpoints. Now, he's gone onto Twitter afterwards to say he's a changed individual. Now, instead of being a white supremacist, he's just an asshole in general, using social justice to beat up on people he doesn't like. It seems like a brand new leaf. He's really turned it around. Give him a golf clap if you can. Now, for those of you not familiar with who Ian Miles Chong is, he is a self-described turbo-feminist. He was also working at the site and defending it during the KSI incident, where he had gone up to people at a convention and motorboated a few chicks. Ian had gone to Twitter to say how terrible this was and had articles on GamerRank saying how horrible this was, until the very woman that was motorboated by KSI in that video went on Twitter herself and told Miles he needs to get fucking laid and stop putting his nose in other people's business. Apparently that advice did not stick. And closing out that first week of September, we had a bit of a bombshell drop, especially in relation to what was going on at Reddit. If you recall, a lot of people were getting comments deleted, especially in that Total Biscuit thread that had upwards of, I think, 25 to 30,000 comments, and tens of thousands of those comments were deleted. Threads were being taken down at a majority of subreddits. People were getting shadow banned, and even more recently, we were just talking about TechRaptor having their account shadow banned. Well, this was a leaked interview between a moderator or former moderator at Reddit that helped to highlight some of the issues that are going on with the administration of the website. And it covered a lot of things, talking about hidden code, bannable word lists, allowing certain people to be doxxed because the administration didn't like them, people being threatened with being labeled a pedophile for trying to provide security for users on the website, as well as their attitude about shadow banning and deleting topics. Now, that audio interview is up on SoundCloud. I'll have a link down in the description if you want to go listen to it. It's about 40 or 50 minutes long, but it really gives some insight into what the hell's going on over there. If you've been shadow banned, if you've felt some weird things are going on behind the scenes, it really helps to explain exactly why you're not crazy and probably what you're thinking is happening is actually happening. Now, not to be outdone by week 1, week 2 was right out of the gates. It started off with its own bang. That was a Lord Cat stream on Twitch TV in which he was talking to some people about an upcoming video that was going to be released. That video, Indie Feasible, was put up by Camera Lady and Short Fat Otaku. That was the channel on YouTube that it appeared on. In the video, there were quite a few allegations about Indiecade and the Independent Games Festival, and talking about the relationships these people had, and information that had come to light after the Polytron hack that took place about 2 or 3 weeks prior. Now, the video was taken down, and there's been some debate as to the exact reason why. There seems to be some sort of legal issue about the information that's in the video itself. I don't really know. I haven't had a chance to talk to either of the individuals that put the video up. I know they've made some statements, and I know that they were talking about re-editing it and having a lawyer vet it so it was good to go. But I do know that they are releasing a third video that's coming up in the next couple of days, and it's going to focus on Silver String Media. So hopefully they can get those re-edited videos up, and they can get that new one out. Now, if you're curious about some of the information they talked about in the first couple of videos, you can go check out this Games Nosh article. I'll have a link in the description as well that goes over some of the information they talked about. Again, it's not the video itself, but it does touch on what they were talking about. Now, up until this point, we had seen a couple of things. We'd seen Kotaku and we'd seen Polygon make some statements in regards to allegations that had come out. Kotaku released statements about Nathan Grayson and his relationship with Zoe Quinn. Stephen Totilo had gone on record saying that they were going to adjust Kotaku's guidelines in reference to Patreon and being able to donate to people in the industry on a monthly basis. Polygon as well did a article talking about their stance on Patreon, but they didn't take the same route that Kotaku did, instead deciding that, hey, there's nothing wrong with this, we don't see an issue. It's not a ethical concern. Well, we finally got a real response, the first website to really step up to the plate. Now, the Escapists had allowed conversation about this up until this point in their discussion forum, but there hadn't been an official policy or response. Many people were still upset about the Zoe Quinn story from months and months and months ago that had blamed her harassment on a website called WizardChan. Well, there was a publisher's note put up, and it addressed quite a lot of things. In that publisher's note, and it's 5 pages long, again, the link will be in the description, they go over a few things, but one of the main things, and I think the most important thing, is they apologize. They apologize for not trying to get the other side of the story. They also set out a new set of standards, what their policy is in regards to authors recusing themselves from covering certain subjects, about Patreon and financial donation, and a whole host of other things. But The Escapist was really the first one to do this. Even though Kotaku and Polygon had addressed some concerns, they didn't come forward and actually try to talk to their community about it. Also this week, we had Milo releasing another article talking to games journalists directly and telling them that he thought they were reacting poorly to the concerns of gamers and those that felt that there were issues going on in the industry. Another piece of news that came out during this time, because people were starting to talk about corruption on all levels in the journalism industry and in gaming itself, was this post that showed up on subreddit Kotaku in Action. This was posted by somebody who said he worked in the Australian gaming journalism business. Now, he had a lot of things to say, but one of the more interesting things that he had put up was that there had been a hack of forums, that 40,000 accounts had been put in danger, and that EA had not responded and the gaming press had not responded because they had relationships with each other. Well, 2 days later, Cinema Blend put up an article, and in fact, EA admits 40,000 users were hacked after a whistleblower steps forward. Let that sink in for a moment. Here you have somebody posting and saying, hey, because of a relationship between this video game company and journalists, this was a story that was not reported on. 40,000 people, their passwords, their usernames, potentially their emails, and personal identifying information were put at risk. But this story was not going to be covered because of close relationships between the gaming press and the industry they cover. And this isn't just smoke being blown up your ass. Somebody actually looked into this. And sure enough, it turns out that actually fucking happened. This is another clear-cut example of the problem when you have too close a relationship with the industry you're covering. The first of which would have been the Fine Young Capitalists not being able to get anybody to cover their story. And of course, up until this point, right now, we're in the middle of the second week of September, that's still happening. Here's Jason Schreier of Kotaku saying, hey, I'm not going to cover the Fine Young Capitalist story. It's too messy for me. And I don't think it's, interesting enough, or I don't think there's enough valid points. I don't know what exactly his deflection was. You can read it here. It's in a post that he had put up. Not that it really mattered, though, because the Fine Young Capitalist, on September 11th, hit their fundraising goal. In fact, they didn't just hit it, they surpassed it. So all the people that had donated had succeeded in helping them reach that goal and push that game development process further ahead. Now you may be wondering, with all these things that are happening, you've got Reddit mods coming forward and saying that people are trying to hush up conversation about this. You have evidence that moderators are talking to Zoe Quinn and suppressing conversation. People are coming forward from fucking Australia saying EA accounts have been put in danger but nobody will cover it because the journalists are friends with the people at EA. You've got the escapists coming forward and saying, hey, we fucked up, we're going to address it, and we're going to reform our policies. You have the Fine Young Capitalists hitting their fundraising goal. And yet, still, at this point, no other sites are talking about any of this. The Gamers Are Dead articles had come out, and that was really it. So you would think it would be weird that Jason Schreier would say there's not a story here. Well, you're going to find out exactly why nobody was covering any of these things. You'll find out why Jason Schreier didn't think this was of interest. Because in week 3, a fucking nuclear bomb is dropped on the heads of these shitty, corrupt game journalists that help to highlight exactly what the fuck is going on. Now, I want to preface week 3 before we get into it, because there are a couple of things. I'm trying to give you a short and dirty chronology to what's going on. But a lot of things happen, and the timeline in which they happen is kind of important. It's going to be important later on, specifically when I'm talking about 4chan and Moot, when I'm talking about XOXO Fest, when I'm talking about all these things. So I'm going to try to lay it out as it happened, but I want you to pay attention to the dates that these happen on. Now, at the start of week 3, we got introduced to the Kool-Aid drinking crazies of XOXO Fest. In fact, people started doing image edits of pictures that were coming from this particular convention. The one you're looking at right now is a pretty good descriptor of the vibe you get when you're looking at XOXO. You see a lot of the same type of person. 20 to 30-year-old, white suburbanite, educated, entrepreneurial, hipster fucks would be the best way really to describe that crowd. And then mix in a little bit of venture capitalism, and that's pretty much what you have. But a lot of the people who attended this have been related either directly or tangentially to Gamergate itself. You had people like Leigh Alexander from Gamasutra who was there. Anita Sarkeesian was there. And as we'll find out in just a little bit, Moot, or Christopher Poole from 4chan, was also there. Now, on the 16th, Based Mom, Christina Summers, released a video, a factual feminist video, asking, are video games sexist? And she looked at the issue and she came to the conclusion that no, gamers are not a demographic of horribly racist, sexist people that are out to hurt others. They're just devoted to their hobby. They like video games, and at the end of the day, that's what they want, just good video games. People liked the video. They responded quite well to it. Of course, the game journalists didn't. We got a lot of articles after that video came out attacking Christina Summers. They were up on Polygon and other websites, and they tried every avenue of attack. She's a conservative. She's not an actual feminist. She's suffering from internalized misogyny. Anything but addressing the points the video raised. Now, beginning around the release of this video, and up until about the 19th, so in the span of 3 days, people started to notice something happening on 4chan, specifically on the V-board and even later on Poll. They noticed mods were doing it for free much more than they usually did. The frequency of them fucking with users was increasing exponentially every day. Now, we would find out exactly why that was in just a little bit. But first, that bombshell. Now, Milo had hinted that something big was coming out. He had said, you guys aren't going to fucking believe this. All those talks that you've had, all the speculation about there being some kind of coordinated attack, especially when you consider that the Gamers Are Dead articles seem to be a coordinated attack. You had 12 to 14 articles in a 24-hour period of time with the exact same spin, the exact same narrative, all yelling at gamers who were upset that video game journalism might be corrupt. And to gamers, that looked like there was something going on, like there was a secret group coordinating what was happening. Well, the bombshell hit. There was a secret group, Game Journos Pro. Now, the list had been established about 4 years previously by Kyle Orland of Ars Technica. And among the members, you will find prominent figures from nearly every video game journalism website. People like Jason Schreier. You remember Jason, who just a week before the article had come out had said, I don't want to cover the Fine Young Capitalist. There's no reason to do it. I don't see a story here. Well, now we know why he didn't want to cover it. He is a member of Game Journos Pro. And what did they talk about on Game Journos Pro? Well, this very first article had touched on one of the threads and one of those email chains. And one of those email chains was about Zoe Quinn. How they were going to handle the story, how they were going to handle the fallout of it. And you can notice, and I highly encourage you to go read the article that Milo put out, because he has snippets up of exactly what they said. And in fact, later on, he'll release even more information about this particular group. But you will see they keep each other in line. People like Ben Kuchera would yell at others and tell them that he was going to stop talking to him at that exact moment because he wanted to remain civil. Greg Tito of The Escapist was on this particular group, and he had said, we have a conversation going on at The Escapist. I don't necessarily agree with what's being said, but I don't see a problem with it. And he was bombarded for daring to allow open conversation. Ryan Smith had mentioned, why is it that we cover one sort of topic, but we won't cover the other? Why will people run pieces like Max Temkin, but when it comes to Zoe Quinn, which is pretty much the exact same kind of issue, we will not cover it? And he was bombarded with hate for even asking that question. People in this specific group knew Zoe Quinn. They had a personal relationship with her. One particular individual talked about having conversations about his relationship with her, and specifically mentioning the Feel Better gift that was proposed in this group itself. If you remember the developer letter that was circulating around that was signed by people in different video game companies saying that they wanted peace and, give peace a chance and everybody should love one another and hold hands, you will see the predecessor of that discussed by games journalists weeks before that letter ever materialized. They wanted to do the exact same thing but with game journalists. And the idea was shot down because it would look too suspicious. So how fucking convenient then that after that was proposed in this secret group of game journalists who were stifling conversation about Zoe Quinn and about gaming journalism corruption, how convenient is it that their proposal is put a halt to, and then all of a sudden game developers decide to do it? It's almost like they used their connections and personal relationships to get game developers to do it instead. Remember, in week 2, we had the story about somebody saying games journalists wouldn't cover a story about a forum being hacked because they were friends with people at a video game company, with the developers. So it's clear that there is an incestuous relationship going on here, that there's collusion taking place here. This was a damning article. Now, they tried to deflect and they tried to act like this wasn't a big deal. However, reading through the conversations, you can see that it's complete bullshit from their part. Now, going back to our timeline, as I said, the week started and we had all these weird pictures coming out of XOXO Fest. And then we had Summers release her factual feminist video. And then came the bombshell, as I said, Milo released the Game Journals Pro article, his first article about it. Well, during those couple of days, people had noticed the heavy moderation taking place on 4chan, and they wanted a direct answer. They tried asking mods, and mods had told them to go fuck themselves. Well, finally, Moot steps in. And of course, he comes to save the day, right? This is Moodles. This is Christopher Poole. This is Mr. Free Speech. Well, you would be dead wrong. He posts this. Gamergate discussions will no longer be allowed. And pretty much go fuck yourself. If you read that last line, I know the screen cap might be a little blurry, I apologize for it, but he essentially takes a parting jab at people interested in Gamergate and tries to tell them to fuck off and that they're no different really than Guy Fawkes mask wearing idiots. That is a level of respect he has for Gamergate, and the fact he's using Anonymous as an insult means he doesn't give a shit about them either. Now, I'm not going to go too much into depth right now. Like I said, I just want to give you a basic timeline. But be aware, at this convention Moot was at, along with people like Leigh Alexander and Anita Sarkeesian, were venture capitalists. Venture capitalists who he had previous relationships with, who funded projects he worked on. And we would also come to find out, and again, this will be covered more in depth later on, that he had relationships with people working directly at Gawker. Gawker is the parent company of Kotaku. Now, it's around this exact same time that the Greg Lisby interview is starting to circulate a little bit more. Now, this was somebody who was interviewed. He wasn't specifically briefed on every aspect of Gamergate. He was just asked certain questions in regards to journalism ethics. He is somebody who taught law and journalism ethics, so he would be somebody you would want to talk to about. Now, the raw, unedited interview is up on YouTube. Again, the link will be in the description. You can go watch it yourself. But some of the key points he touches on, and what I find to be really damning when you look at the game journalist, is he's asked, what about people being financially connected to the industry they cover? Absolutely not, he says. That is an ethical problem. What about people having romantic relationships or landlord and tenant relationships with people in an industry they cover? Absolutely not. That is an ethical problem. He even goes so far as to state that though you may develop friendships or you may have a cordial relationship with people in an industry that you cover, it is an extremely tenuous line that you're walking, and that a good journalist should always be hyper vigilant in regards to something like that. And as this Game Journos Pro article that Milo had put out shows, games journalists are anything but vigilant. They are lazy, ego-centered assholes. Now, I don't want to make this sound like I'm applying this as a blanket statement to every games journalist. Now, we've seen a lot of them step up and say, either I have problems with this, and you'll see that in the leaked emails that's up on the Breitbart article. Some people in that email chain said, hey, you know what? This is wrong. I don't want any part of it. There is a wall that should be put up between myself and a subject, and this is a breach of professional ethics. Other people would come out later and say, I didn't like it, or I wanted no part of it. People directly questioned it. So there are good games journalists, but there seems to be an atmosphere or an attitude in this particular industry where those people are suppressed and not really allowed to talk about it. I mean, my God, look how they treat each other in private. It's no wonder the majority of them don't want to say anything in public. They're going to get shit on in such a way that their careers will be over. Now, if you thought week 3 was already over with, you'd better hold on to your asses, because when you look at the entire month of September in review, from the period of the 14th to the 21st, was a massive amount of activity. From articles being posted to public stances being taken from different individuals inside and outside of the industry. Take this niche gamer article from an Xbox dev. One of the people who worked on the Xbox design team weighed in on Gamergate. Again, it's a fantastic article and it gives you an inside perspective on how they view these issues. But of course, Milo wasn't done either. After releasing that first Game Journals Pro article, he had one more to pop out. And this one has to be read to be believed. The emails that prove video games journalism must be reformed, and even looking at that title quote, who here hasn't slept with a PR person or game developer, am I right, helps to highlight one of the issues with games journalism. It is a two-faced nature of them telling their audience that they're misogynist and racist and sexist and horrible, yet behind closed doors they will make jokes about sex and jokes about unethical behavior, and there's no consequence to it whatsoever. It's fine for them to do it, but not okay for us to do it. They're going to chide us and profiteer off telling the core audience that they're flawed and that there's something wrong with them. And that little voice most people have in the back of their head telling them not to be insufferable pricks 24 hours a day seems to be missing from a lot of these people. Just take a look at the deluge of articles I had mentioned against Summers for her video. Now, one interesting thing about the social justice warrior mentality found in a lot of these gaming journalists who are at the core of the problem we're dealing with is they can dish it, but they can't take it. This quote is from the Polygon article about Summers' video. Summers is also fond of insults. She tweeted that I am a mansplainer and invited me to address what she describes as her ideas. Others added that because I question the views of one woman, I must be a misogynist. One person compared me to Napoleon, the pig, not the emperor. I am not the first person to face the wrath of video game sexism deniers. Well, I think the person who wrote this article needs to listen and believe, you mansplaining misogynist. It is yet just another example of how they can fling shit, but they cannot handle it being flung back at them. If you read the email chains that they have between themselves, you'll see how they laud the idea of closing down and heavily regulating comments. They cannot stand when people give them criticism. They cannot stand having to answer for their actions or their statements. It's also by this point in September that we start to see that the people who have been writing and mass emailing advertisers are finally having an effect. Now, there were few that already had come out and said, we're going to pull advertising from these different game journalism sites, or we're not going to associate with them because it's bad PR. But then we see something like this from Rock Paper Shotgun, essentially begging for money. Rock Paper Shotgun is now running the equivalent of a Patreon account asking you to directly pay them money for merely existing and writing terrible articles. And yet, still there's even more in this third week. The admin of Funny Junk takes a moment to shit on Moot's head and laugh at the fact that he can't handle people talking about something that personally might offend him. In fact, the admin of Funny Junk invites people to come and mock him. And this is just a reminder that Funny Junk is one of the only places that has allowed free discussion about this, up there with The Escapist and a few other image boards and websites. But Funny Junk has had that position from the very beginning. You can talk about whatever you want, put up the content you want to, and we're not going to interfere in any way. Now, most people have probably noticed by this point that NeoGAF had refused to really allow any discussion about this. People had been banned from the forums. Conversations had been shut down repeatedly. Well, it starts to come out that maybe NeoGAF had a reason for that. This article that was put up on the Ralph Retort talks about NeoGAF and the site owner allegedly illegally selling content to Kotaku for a profit. Now, they had done this action, and then if you look back at the timeline of these events, had changed their terms of service agreement to allow them to do it. But the fact of the matter is, this article points out a timeline in which they had sold the information and then altered the terms of service to make it allowable. Well, bravo, NeoGAF. And of course, who could forget about Dina? God bless Mighty Number 9. You know, banning people that are financial backers to a project because they're talking about something unrelated to that project at different locations on the internet. And then saying, I don't like what you're saying, so I'm going to block you from the forums and from the official Comcept Twitter account. This is extra ridiculous when you take into account the fact that one of the backer rewards for donating to the project was forum access. So by banning people from the forums, you are rescinding their reward. Now, people began to ask for refunds. They wanted to do chargebacks, and they were told they couldn't. Well, that's a great job from a really good PR manager. Obviously, she got the job because she was the most qualified, not because she knew people at the company or was dating somebody who worked there. That would be insane. And if you're interested in reading more about how the Mighty Number 9 shitfest is now continuing into Gamergate, feel free to read the Ralph Retort because they have an article up about that as well. And this all, of course, brings us up to the current week, week 4, or the very end of it. And this week has been slow compared to the third week, but then again, with the amount of activity that happened from the 14th to the 21st, it's understandable, especially when you look at it all put together. A lot of things have happened. Well, what happened this last week? Quite a few things, actually. You had the Investigator come on to the Amazing Atheist channel to do a video about Gamergate. In fact, a lot of prominent atheists have spoken about this, and it's understandable because I think at the core of it, they see a similar thing happening right now. Now, I was able to do a live stream about 2 or 3 days ago with King of Pole, and he had somebody on named Koss, and Koss had mentioned something that we had joked about all the way back around the time of PAX, and that was the idea that they were going to introduce the term Gamer Plus. Now, atheists know what that means. They dealt with it with Atheism Plus when social justice warriors come into a community and shit it up. Well, Koss actually said that he personally views the use of the term player as a more apt title. So essentially, instead of Gamer Plus, it would be player. So perhaps those rumors back during PAX about Gamers Plus being introduced weren't so far off if the other side is already looking at trying to change and find a new term. Well, it wasn't just the Amazing Atheists. You've had people like Thunderfoot make quite a few videos. In fact, he suffered because of it. He put up videos criticizing Anita Sarkeesian onto his Twitter account. And because he dared to do that, his Twitter was put on a blockbot list, and it was taken off of Twitter itself. He had his account shut down. Now you can look through his posting history. People have screen caps of the last handful of posts that he put up, and nothing about them violates the terms of service. He was bullied off for daring to speak out, for daring to have another opinion. So you have people like the Amazing Atheist and Thunderfoot stepping in and talking about this. You have people like Justicar stepping in and talking about this. And these aren't necessarily positions of people who are gamers themselves, just bystanders who recognize something that's happening to the gaming community that they already went through. You have other signs that gamers are sick of game journalism and they're sick of SJWs in their hobby. One good example of this would be the Steam curator list. If you go to take a look, who's the top curator? It's not Kotaku, it's not Polygon, it's not Rock Paper Shotgun or PC Gamer or any of them. Who is it? Total Biscuit. A top spot for a top hat. And it's interesting too that he has the #1 spot, because if you go and read those Breitbart articles about the Game Journo Pro mailing list, you will quickly see that they dislike Total Biscuit. In fact, they shit talk a lot of YouTubers. They do not like the idea of somebody else coming in and fulfilling the role that they have. Because if somebody else brings competition into the marketplace, they can't be corrupt assholes. They actually have to have standards then, so they can compete. How fucking crazy is that? Now, maybe you're wondering exactly who's on that Game Journos Pro list. I mean, after all, the previous couple of articles had talked about certain emails, but we never got a complete list. Well, Milo's got you covered because his most recent article actually lists every single one of them. So if you're curious who is working at what website and is a part of this, go check out the article because it will have their name listed and where they work. Now, some of you may be familiar with the Sarkeesian Effect documentary. That is still up on Patreon. Right now it's sitting at $6,600 a month. That is $6,600 of people's money that they're willing to put forward towards this project because they want to hear a different viewpoint. They're so sick, so absolutely tired of games journalists creating an atmosphere where people can't criticize or bring up other points of view. I mean, look what happened to Thunderfoot. He tried to use a social media service to air his opinions, and he was cut off at the fucking knees for it. So it's not a surprise that people would go and try to fund their own documentary to bring up an opposing viewpoint, because God knows where else are they going to go at this point. But every day this goes on, every single day it continues. It builds momentum, even during the slow days, even during the slow weeks. Hell, just take a look at the hashtags for Gamergate or Not Your Shield. This week, Gamergate surpassed 1 million tweets, and Not Your Shield is well over 100,000. Now, those numbers on their own are impressive, but when you consider the fact that multiple sites have refused to allow people to comment, from NeoGAF to 4chan, TV Tropes, and others, it is a remarkable thing that this has any momentum to it at all. But it shows the fact that gamers are sick of being talked down to. They are sick of corrupt people trying to act as if they don't have to have ethical standards. They are sick of people acting like the indie scene and games in general don't have issues to them. These past 4 weeks have highlighted that, and it has been one thing after another, momentum building upon momentum, bombshell after bombshell after bombshell. And when you sit back and you really take in the full picture, it is quite fucking remarkable.